welcome to everyone as well. Hello to everyone watching the show for the first time. Welcome. And for those of you that obviously are regular viewers to the show, you'll understand the format. Myself and Amit running through kind of real life scenarios, and we've been a bit of a HubSpot journey. I think it makes sense that it's all orange this week, right? So we're broadcasting from a different location. Usually you see us differently. So I know your comfort levels are not quite there, Amit.
No, I've been, I don't know, very kind of comfortable with my home setup and actually standing up. I've been doing a lot of working, literally just standing up. I've barely kind of sat down for the last sort of 2 or 3 months. So yeah, it's all very different being in the office and sitting at a desk and all of that kind of stuff. But it's good to be back. I mean, it's nice. It feels good to be in the office and kind of having a few of us around as well, which is very cool.
That's it, yeah. And I don't know if you noticed, we've got a beautiful background here done by one of our guys, Neha. She worked really hard on this. So we've got the digital growth show. You can see you got the orange, and this actually looks fake, I think, over my left shoulder, but it's real. So that is a window, and that's a beautiful view of Barsha Heights. So yeah, just to get the ball rolling. So I guess what are we talking about today, Amit?
Yeah, so today the focus is going to be on sort of content marketing, content distribution, but essentially just the kind of power of content in general. It's funny, we've been obviously talking about content for years and years, pretty much in every meeting that we have. But
yeah,
I guess from our perspective, we've really kind of seen how this has really impacted our business, I'd say, in the last 3 or 4 months as well. So, I think it's such an important topic. It's definitely worth, giving it the attention it deserves. And yeah, pretty excited about the show today.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think of the time that we are, I think content is even more important. I think we'll take a bit of a dig into that, but we haven't got many slides to show you guys today. So we tend to either bounce off slides or bounce off polls, and then if you've got any questions during the show, just obviously, ask a question, ask away. We're happy to. We try to make it as interactive as we can. But what we did want to show you is almost like a rundown. So what are the kind of key things we're going to talk about today, just to give you an idea of what's to come.
Cool. And yeah, like magic, it just appears. So basically, yeah, we'll be kind of talking about sort of content marketing in general. I think one of the data and theory is obviously very important. So we'll be talking about this little thing called ZMOT, which is up on the screen. And I think we'll be talking about the different sort of content marketing options. So if you're thinking of launching your own sort of content marketing strategy, then what kind of options are available. From a kind of content distribution perspective, so again, once content's created, what do you do with it? Where does it go? How do you get people to see your content? And I think the bit that I'm excited about is telling a bit more about our story, Andrew. I think that'd be fun.
Yeah.
And then finally, really kind of measurement and ROI, which is I think hugely important for marketers, to really kind of be able to demonstrate that the content that they're creating has an actual impact on the business from perhaps a revenue perspective, but these kind of things can get measured, right? So
yeah, definitely, yeah. I mean, I think that's an important thing. So we definitely wanted to share our story and the success associated to that, but then we're going to show you right at the end here, actually, what is the value of producing some of this content. Because as Amit's previously spoken about, I do like to talk, but there's usually, I'd like to think, a reason behind it, most of the time anyway. So I think that's it. So I mean, should we start on ZMOT? Kind of talk a bit about what I mean. Oh, actually, let's take a step back. I mean, so I'd say, why at the moment do you think having content is so important?
Right now?
you know, right now. So I mean, we've kind of been on a content journey or an inbound content marketing journey for the last 7 years. But why do you feel that it has even more importance at the moment?
I think just because a lot of people are in a state of flux at the moment. They're not really sure what's going on around them. And so any kind of content, I think, which is kind of designed to help people, I think is really having a kind of, you know, positive impact, you know, not just from a kind of content visibility perspective, but just an overall, you know, I don't know, you know, just an overall kind of provider of support,
Yeah.
right? You know, where, you know, I think all of us, you know, if we're not sure about something, we perhaps, you know, turn to Google, and a lot of this sort of content at the moment is super helpful to people. So I think right now, again, you know, rather than kind of sales pitchy type content, I think content that's informative and helpful, I think is a way to go. But
Yeah. I mean, I think also, you know, the lack of just human interaction, human contact, is almost removing some of that research from other people as well. So typically, you may, you know, when you're investigating a product, service, brand, or whatever, you'd obviously like to hear personal stories, or you know, at least somebody that has worked with a company or worked with X, Y, Z, and obviously now a lot of that's missing. You can't just turn to the person next to you in the booth, or you know, when you're out socializing. So I think there's even more now, you know, an opportunity for people to, as you said, to research, jump online, jump on Google. Some people have time as well, so people have a lot of time on their hands now. And obviously, I think the usage of online devices and mobiles has kind of increased. You know, because we're spending our whole time on here. Our meetings are virtual. Everything is here, so that comfort level just kind of tends to spike. And we touched upon this, I think, Amit, a few weeks ago when we spoke about e-commerce, you know, and how obviously some people have just seen e-commerce for the first time. So yeah, I'd say right now at the moment, content is kind of super important, right? And as you mentioned, the type of content is important.
Yeah. So I think, look, let's. I think, you know, you mentioned, and we both sort of spoke about Zmart earlier, but let's go into Zmart, because I really think, for me, Zmart was one of the best pieces of content that I used, and you know, to really sort of contextualize what content marketing was and the role that it plays today. But yeah, I mean, so do you want to kind of talk people through Zmart, Andrew, what it stands for, and yeah.
I think it really so I mean, Zmart's one of those gems that that obviously we discovered, and then we spoke about a lot, and we do speak about it a lot. We've spoken about it in presentations, we've spoken about it in meetings, and Zmart basically stands for zero moment of truth. So Forrester and Google did a study on, you know, the kind of percentage of the things that you investigate, research prior to making a buying decision. Okay, so instead of just kind of going out impulse purchase, we're not talking about that. We're talking about, you know, a buying decision in a very business sense, or in a personal sense as well. So I mean, the study a few years back, at the time, it was 70% of your research is done until that kind of moment when you make a decision to decide. And we've spoken about this in the past, where you may even be at the point of purchase and you're still researching. You're still kind of looking for perhaps a better price or a better deal or a different type of product that does the same thing. So effectively, obviously, in that Google space, people go to Google to look for products or services, and essentially, you know, what is kind of hand in hand with Zmart is the mantra that Google is no longer a search engine; it's now an answers engine. So we don't ask Google, you know, hotel Dubai. We ask Google, where's the best place to stay for a family and a beach hotel in Dubai, right?
Sure.
You're asking more specific questions, right?
Yeah, but I think just on that Zmart point as well. So basically, about 70% mark is, you know, where people have done research, and they're going to obviously Google, like you said, the search engine. You know, they're kind of doing all of this research, going on to different pieces of, referring to different pieces of content on various websites. They get to that 70% point, which is that moment they make themselves visible to the potential companies that they're going to work with, right?
Yeah.
Or the company they're going to potentially buy from. And I think in real terms, I think this is where people tend to walk into a showroom. This is where people perhaps fill out a form online. Right? It's that visibility point, right? Where now, they've done enough research where they feel comfortable that, and they've perhaps shortlisted now, potential vendors or suppliers. And that's the point where they start that engagement. And I think that's a very kind of key point. So, obviously we, this piece of research, and the reason I think we still refer to it today is just very valuable, because it really helps us to kind of understand what's going on behind the scenes, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's very rare that we speak to somebody now who is totally uneducated about our product or our service. No matter what kind of business we're offering, right? There's people are really invested in that kind of research process. Perhaps they don't even realize they're doing it, because it's almost like second nature now, right? But they are. They're creating mental shortlists. They're educating themselves, and I think that whole kind of self-education piece, I think, is hugely important when we're talking about sort of content marketing as well, especially in that kind of B2B scenario, but also B2C, right? So, I think it's very rare now that somebody walks into a car showroom having perhaps not watched a number of maybe YouTube videos, right? Read reviews from actual owners of that car, or people that have kind of driven those cars, and and I think this is where it gets really interesting. But going back to the point that I made earlier, this research is now nearly 10 years old.
Yes.
And if you look at it, at that point, so 10 years ago, Google and Forrester said, look, most people now are 70% of their kind of way through that purchasing decision before they make themselves visible.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think that figure actually looks like today? Because I don't think it's 70%. I think
I think it was the early 90s, right? They were talking about the fact that, it's up there. Because it was just a hockey stick at that point. People are more connected. There's obviously then there's now a lot of companies that obviously understand that individuals are researching and they want to provide that information to them. So that itself, by people producing more content, valuable content, obviously has increased that dramatically. So even if you look at search terms in Google, how that has changed. If you look at things like Siri, Alexa, Google Home, where we just ask a question when we get the answer. So we're kind of changing our whole style to be more conversational anyway. And frankly, the search engine results have got better as well, right? It's rare, I guess, now where you sit there and type in 4 or 5 different searches to get the right result. They're working very hard to make sure that they're delivering that result based on your research.
Because they have to. Because at the end of the day, Google does have competition, albeit maybe not a dominant one. But they, the one thing Google are petrified of is that people stop using the search engine, because the amount of revenue that's still attributed to those sponsored clicks and things like that is just huge, right? And so Google's objective is still very much to kind of deliver the best quality answers to those questions that are being asked, right? But I think it's Zmot is very kind of interesting. I think once companies sort of start to relate it back to their industries. If you imagine, for example, hotels, right? You mentioned hotels earlier.
Yeah.
At what point does a hotel now typically know that, a guest is in the market for a room, right? It's typically after they've made the booking, right? Because of things like, online travel agencies, your booking.coms and your hotel.coms and your Expedia. Now people are kind of doing that journey, they're researching, and actually the hotels are only finding out afterwards, right? It's after the fact. Okay, this person's now made a booking, and they've got no kind of insights perhaps into that whole research process. But I feel as if if companies really kind of start to use Zmot properly, it's that point of understanding. Okay, look, we know people are engaging in content. Okay, they're out there researching, they're doing their homework. They're doing their due diligence. Whatever you want to call it. But the reality is, where are they doing that research, right? And for a company, I'd say, again, B2B and B2C, if you have enough good quality content in the digital space so that people can find your content when they're in that research phase, I think that is really the ultimate goal of content marketing for a lot of kind of brands and businesses, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's hugely important. So, it's not just about, okay, we know people are researching, but where is it they're researching? If they're not researching in our house, that means they're potentially researching somewhere else. And I think one of the other benefits to this is not just, okay, cool, we're doing research using our content, but that also gives companies an opportunity to guide that thought process, right? Educate them better.
You get them at the start of the journey, right?
Right, and there's a big sort of psychological play here, because if I'm being educated by a specific brand, right? For example, someone comes onto the Nexa's website, we have 250 different articles that are kind of designed to help, right? Now, if people are kind of educating themselves using our content, the great thing is by the time they speak to us, right, if we are one of those companies that they shortlist, we've actually helped educate them, right? And now the things that we say are going to kind of resonate and relate to what their thinking is, because we've been guiding that thinking. And I think this is really important. So yeah, cool. So look, I think we've kind of exhausted Zmot in terms of what in terms of this part of the show. But I think when we're talking about content as well, I think it's good to kind of look at the different sort of content options, and perhaps we can let's launch a poll and let's kind of see what kind of content or how invested people are in sort of content marketing. So let me just launch this, guys. So 2 parts to this. The first question is on a scale of 1 to 10, and we're saying 10 being the most. How invested are you in your company in content creation and content marketing? So guys, if you can just choose that. So are you kind of 1 to 3, which is not very invested within content marketing? 4 to 6, slightly in.
I'm not sure if the polling's working, Amit. We may have a bit of a gremlin in the system. Oh, hold on. It was just so it was just there might have been a gremlin in the system, but it was just obviously it's pushed through now. So if you scroll down as well, as you start to scroll down, you can see the different options. So we've got at the top there, as Amit mentioned, part 1 is 1 to 3, 10 being obviously you're smashing it, you're kind of all singing, all dancing content champion. And then obviously 1, you're pretty much doing nothing. Perhaps you've got an email signature, that's your content.
Sure.
And as you scroll down, so have you got results in, Amit? Should we share them?
I do, yeah. Let me just share those. And again, pretty interesting. So yeah, I mean, obviously a very, very even split here in terms of companies who are kind of invested in this approach or not. And I think from those who are invested in this, blogs is great.
Number 1.
Yeah. And that's interesting, the explainer video side of things. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's something that something that we love. So yeah, it's great to see. Okay, awesome. Thanks, guys. So
yeah, I mean, I think obviously with that kind of content that's there, sometimes people obviously just naturally move to a blog, right? So we're saying kind of when we're looking for things and we want people to answer, but that isn't your only option, right? As we've seen, you've got a whole raft of content on how you want to just kind of dissect it and promote it, right? From kind of blogs, explainer videos, podcasts. Interesting. No one did podcasts. That's interesting.
Yeah, and I think yeah. I mean, so I think it's worth exploring these more. So if we're looking at for example, if we look at blogs, there's a lot of type of there's a vast amount of content you can create. But I think from a kind of informative thought leadership perspective, I think blogs are super valuable. Google love that kind of content as well.
Yeah.
And so it ticks many different boxes. If you're creating sort of regular flow of sort of quality content, I guess, right?
Yeah, and also I mean people can interact differently. Remember, so they may actually, their journey may start with you through a blog, but actually you may go and move into an explainer video or something like this, like a web series or a webinar. I mean, it doesn't mean that you have to kind of focus in one area. You can kind of mix it up a bit. But as you said, obviously, as a starting point, Google loves blogs, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think one of the best kind of stories out there from a kind of blog perspective comes from a guy called Marcus Sheridan, and I think we've mentioned him on the show a couple of times before.
We should get him on.
We should get him on, actually.
Not sure what his fee is now, though. His speaking fee.
Yeah, but this guy essentially, if we go back maybe 10 years now, right? So if we look at well, even longer, but 08, 09, he was he calls himself a pool guy, right? And he basically had a very kind of small swimming pool business that was based out of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. And basically, recession hit, obviously, the banking and financial crisis hit the US. And all of a sudden, everyone who'd ordered the swimming pool was canceling, right? They're asking for deposits back. His business just essentially sort of fell off a cliff. And instead of firing his sales guys, what he basically did is he decided that his kind of solution to this and to get out of the mess that the business was in was to just create content. And then what he's done is basically, over that period, is they just answered every possible question that their customers had asked. So I think the process that they went through, and this is always a great process, if you guys are ever stuck on, what kind of content you should be creating from a blog perspective, his process was, okay, look, sales team, make a list now of every single question that you guys have been asked by a potential customer during the sales process, for as far back as you can remember. And he literally ended up with a massive list of questions. And then what they did is they tackled that collectively and basically answered each one of those questions in the form of a blog article, right? And essentially what they realized is very quickly that Google loved that content because people were typing in, how much is a fiberglass pool cost? And nobody was mentioning.
That's a good point, Amit. A lot of it was price driven, right?
Right.
And no one was talking about pricing.
Exactly. Because people are doing that research. When they're researching, they're not just looking about quality, quality and things like that. They want to know how much something's going to cost, right?
Exactly.
And so, he tackled all of those kinds of questions, how much does this type of pool cost and that type of pool cost? But basically, because Google was stuffed of that information because nobody globally was prepared to answer those questions, whereas his articles tackled that head on. And so in a very kind of short space of time, what happened is, all of his articles were ranking at the top of Google. People coming on there, they were learning, they were self-educating, they were going through that whole process. And those people who were then ready to kind of order trusted this brand because these guys were the only ones who were prepared to answer a question nobody else was. Yeah, and again, They were doing their research, on the Liverpool's website as opposed to a competitor website. And it's funny, we saw Marcus about 6 months ago, and yes. that one article, the how much does a fiberglass pool cost, is generated over $6 million of revenue now.
Yeah,
one blog article.
Crazy.
One blog article, and again, we'll talk about the measurement and kind of ROI and those things, but I mean that's just that's significant, and I think and I think that's probably one of the challenges as to maybe the people who aren't perhaps blogging is because how do you draw that straight line between an article and actually the money it generates, right? I think that's been in the past pretty difficult to do, but and then like I said, we'll touch on that a little bit later.
Yeah, but, and also the longevity of this content. So I think the fact is that when you are producing this content, you may be producing it in now around a subject or a topic that's relevant today, but that will still carry its relevancy through the years. So I mean, one of the very first websites that we blogs that we wrote was how much does a website cost. It was probably one of the first pieces of content that went out. Obviously that's still on our site. It's been updated and adjusted, obviously, but it's still got legs. So whatever you kind of invest, and I think in the past you've kind of phrased kind of compound marketing. whatever you've kind of invested in, you've got to look at the lifetime value of that content. As opposed to, I put a blog up, okay, I'm waiting. It's not about that. It's creating, good quality content, as you mentioned, answering people's questions, and making sure that Google falls in love with you effectively, right?
Okay, yeah, cool. I mean, it's exactly that. I think, Andrew, look, none of the audience create podcasts. Why don't we talk about that? Because I think that's perhaps, there's no point in sort of educating people who already know about stuff, but maybe podcasts kind of, people are interested in that kind of content. I mean, you're the right guy to answer that because you've been podcasting for years over here. But what's your kind of, what would be your advice, and why would podcasting be a good, potential content piece for businesses?
Yeah, look, I think as we mentioned, from a Google perspective, obviously, that blog is driving a lot of that initial inquiry, that initial traffic. But it's from a podcast perspective, there's a couple of things to consider. First and foremost, some people just don't like reading, right? So the fact is, they may want to read through an article. They may not have the time. They may be busy bouncing from each other, and people, like to listen to things. So we started podcasting. Well, actually, we had a radio show, then we started podcasting nearly, I'd say, kind of want to say 4 or 5 years ago. And it's kind of, regular different podcasts that we're putting out across different topics. It's actually different from what we do here. We've recently launched a network called Podaholics as well, where we're hosting various shows. And I think the nice thing about podcasting is that the barrier to entry now is so low. So if you download an app called Anchor, for example, you can pretty much just off your phone, sit in a room, as long as it's a quiet room, you've either got your headphones or your Bluetooth in, and start podcasting. And by that, I mean literally just talking about a topic. And that can be with a friend, it could be with a co-host, or you could be talking about, something relevant to you. The important thing is to choose it either from a business perspective that's relevant to your business, or a personal perspective. So any one of those questions that we've spoken about, so how much does a website cost? That could easily be put into a podcast, right? So, 5-minute, 10-minute, 20-minute, 40-minute digestible podcasts. The other interesting thing is here that the podcast community is growing substantially. So from that Anchor app, for example, it will distribute your podcast across the known networks. So like Spotify, Deezer, Apple Music, Google Podcasts, automatically. So automatically this gets distributed for you, and you can also embed this on your site as well. So depending on how people are listening or finding you, they may find you just directly through the podcast network, or they may actually come to your website and then decide to listen on the site as well. Okay. So I think, yeah.
I was going to say, so I mean, you talk about the barrier to entry being very low, and Anchor, is a great tip there for people, I think, who are interested in kind of learning more. When I kind of envision a podcast, you kind of, and guess we had the setup ourselves, right? With these big microphones and this kind of
that's right,
complicated kind of right. So people don't need that now, is what you're saying.
No. I mean, I think the thing is that, so interestingly enough, there's a whole community that's exploded in the US and Europe where, a really popular kind of mic setup is called Yeti. So they actually have a podcast setup. So you can go on Amazon and buy a podcast setup, and that has your mic, your mixer. But if you're kind of starting out, you really can, straight after this show, literally do a podcast. Get it out there and kind of start to do it. And again, with any kind of content, it's just about the consistency. So it's about, no matter what you get caught up doing, make sure that you're kind of regularly putting out that podcast, even if it's once a month or once a week or whatever, that you've got some consistency associated to it, and you're adding value, right? So that's the other thing, is any kind of content that we're putting out there should be value to somebody, right? But I think what's interesting as well is because obviously, more and more people are discovering podcasts. You're finding more people listening to in the car, so when you're driving, at home of an evening. Obviously, with the rise of Audible and the books as well, people are becoming more comfortable to digest content, all through audio. So again, it's about giving people that choice. I mean, most of the podcasting that we do as well is filmed, similar to this, and then put up on YouTube, because believe it or not, a lot of people love watching podcasts and listening to them at the same time. So they see people's facial expressions and interacting with the audience and interacting with co-hosts as well. So yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those ones, interestingly enough, that I think people do think that it is going to, wow, it's going to be an investment. It's going to be complicated. I have to, learn new things. No, it's pretty much nowadays, like, there's an app for that, right? Then there's an app for podcasting. So yeah, if you have thought about that in the past, I definitely encourage you to explore that avenue.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think that's great advice, guys. I'm just going to throw it out there. So look, if you've got any questions related to the topic today, please send it through. So you can either use the chat function or the Q&A function. Yeah. But yeah, just send whatever questions you have. If you want us to kind of focus on a specific area of content marketing, feel free to do that as well. I think, Andrew, one of the things that I think is is interesting. A podcast I absolutely love, but video, right? And I want to almost talk about again, touching on the point that very few people like to read, which devastates me personally, by the way, right? Because I love to write. So yeah, that kind of really hurts. But I get it, right?
Oh, no, I said some people don't like to read.
Some people don't like to read. Okay, but I guess what it is video plays a big part of that as well, right? And so again, let's talk about the video piece. How can people sort of leverage video today?
Again, I think it's super simple to start looking at video. There's a couple of different ways that we've leveraged video. So I think let's touch upon that now. I know we were kind of going to tell our story towards the end, but I mean, I think it's valuable now. So a video can be different things. All right. So in all honesty, this is a video. So we do this digital growth show. We've been doing it now for a few months. Once it's finished, it's edited by the team, and then it's put up to be watched later, right? So you can watch it later. We get a lot of views post show as well, and it obviously gets distributed up on YouTube. So this is a video. There's obviously the animated explainer videos that some people would mention that they're doing as well. But in all honesty, we've been using something called Vidyard as well. So what we've done, for example, is if we want to show somebody a walkthrough for HubSpot, for example. So we're a diamond partner of HubSpot, and we've been speaking about that over the last couple of weeks. And obviously they're heavily involved in the, effectively founding the movement of content and inbound marketing. We use something called Vidyard. So Vidyard will use your camera again on your Mac, and basically you can walk through while you're moving something on the screen. You can talk through. So again, and explain the video. Free. So Vidyard is free. It's not anything that you have to consider and invest in again. But just it's something that you can use to your own advantage. And also, I mean, this. So what I started doing recently is I started doing video pieces to LinkedIn. So on the LinkedIn platform, so we've obviously spoken about web and where you can start to distribute this content. I think we're coming to that. But from a video perspective, interestingly enough, one of the first things that I purchased on e-commerce during the lockdown was one of the light rings, just purely for making sure that my beard was glistening when I was actually making my recordings. But great little setup, again, minimal investment, 100 dirhams, and you've got this light ring, a pod, a kind of tripod that you can sit your camera on, and a little kind of 20 dirham clicker that you can automate the recording. Again, the software is built into LinkedIn, or you can download some other bits of software if you want to do some editing, but it's getting to camera straight away. So I think even if you don't want to be on camera, you can still do explainer videos. You can actually do through the iPhone and through Android as well. You have the ability to do screen record. So we showed, for example, a few videos on how to use the HubSpot app So if you were using the HubSpot app, doing a bit of a walkthrough again, that didn't have anyone's face; it just had audio. So I think it's really about understanding what you want to talk about, and then realizing that those videos can present themselves in different formats. And it's also about repurposing some of that content. So our digital growth show, the team are now pulling out digital shorts. So our discussion typically lasts anywhere up to 40 minutes. We've had some that have crossed over the hour, but we're pulling out bite-sized chunks, and we're putting that up as well as like shorts or reviews or obviously a bit of conclusion or summary. So I think you don't necessarily have to produce studio quality videos for people to enjoy them, right?
No, I think that's an important point. I mean, a lot of these kind of videos today are authentic because they haven't, or feel more authentic and more genuine because they haven't got high production value, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, we definitely haven't been in hair and makeup today. You may have been in hair, but I definitely haven't been in hair and makeup.
Okay, well, let's not go there, mate. So yeah, look, but I think it's important. I think again, so much of this comes down to comfort, right? And people's own sort of comfort with different types of content. And and I guess the only way to kind of overcome some of these fears or concerns that we have is sometimes just tackling it head on. And I kind of love the fact that cost is no longer a big sort of barrier to be able to do this now, right? And like you said, through mobile phones you can now record really good quality video. And I think people really kind of do digest that. And I mean, you were telling me about simple LinkedIn posts that had thousands of views, just purely because people like watching it, right? And perhaps not reading for a few minutes because people's time is valuable. So no, I get that point. I think we'll talk about distribution, but I mean, I'll tell you what, let's tackle distribution.
We had a question, Amit, actually. Came in just from Ashraf. He's asking, what's the difference between video and podcasting? So I guess we pretty much have answered that without actually seeing the question. But I mean, actually, they can be the same, as I mentioned. So a lot of podcasting, you record at the same time, put it up on YouTube or put it on your own website, and you obviously have a video and a podcast at that time. So even, for example, and it's something we haven't done actually, and it's something we probably need to think about it, Amit. But this, when we record through Zoom, we do this through Zoom. They give you the option to just pull out the audio file as well. So you can actually just distribute this as a podcast. I think we haven't done that in the past because we've generally had a slide to show. And obviously when you're showing something or presenting something, it's difficult sometimes to relate that to the audio. But that has an option as well.
Actually, do you know what? You're so right, because I think the key to, I'd say, quality content production, I guess, is how much of that content can you use across different channels, I guess, right?
Yeah.
I think the challenge that a lot of content marketers have is the cost of production, the time it takes. Obviously, we've all got day jobs and all of that kind of stuff. So if you can find a use where perhaps you are recording your video where you can pull the audio out, now suddenly you've got a video and a podcast, or you're creating a blog article that you can then turn into an ebook. Again, you're getting kind of much more kind of use of sort of content that you're creating, right? And most of that effort always goes into that kind of content sort of ideation and then producing that. But if you can then start to leverage that content, maybe repackage it, and then use it on different channels, I think it makes suddenly it starts to become easier to really kind of leverage content and make it work for you, I guess, right?
There's even websites out there that will transcribe podcasts and video. Right. So basically you can take that, video content. So from a video piece of content, you can transcribe it to create a blog on the back of it. And you can also take the audio file to have a podcast. So straight away, you've got 3 pieces of content from one activity, right? So, repurposing that content, and using other distribution methods. So
Sure.
obviously, you know, the fact is that a lot of the time what we'll do is we'll kind of build out a content blueprint for clients, whereby, okay, well, not only are we looking at a content strategy, so what type of content do you want to create, what are the questions it's answering, who's your audience you want to talk to, etc. But where are we going to distribute it? So, you know, is this going to live on LinkedIn, or is this going to live on Twitter, or is it going to be on your Facebook page, or is it just going to live on your website? And I think that again is just gives you the ability to test. You know, you take that one piece of content, you distribute it across all those different networks, and you see what one kind of works, right? And then you kind of play and you test and you manipulate, and that's important as well.
Okay, cool. I mean, look, I think you touched on the distribution side of it there. So, you know, again, for people who are maybe wondering, okay, where do I get started? What should I be creating in terms of content? Should you start at distribution first rather than perhaps even creating content and then trying to figure out where it should go? I mean, what should be the kind of strategic approach to, you know, to this? Do you reverse engineer the distribution path and then figure out what kind of content works, or what would you do?
I think look, bare minimum is just to get yourself a blog in place, right? So I think most people have a website now. If they haven't got a website, they understand that they need one. Believe it or not, there still are kind of companies out there that have just felt there's no need for one in the past, but now a lot of them are scrambling to get that up. And really the blog component of that is where, you know, you do have the ability to update, you have the ability to produce content on a regular basis. So this isn't building out new web pages, coming up with, you know, new elaborate content to entice people. No, this is real, genuine content that people want to digest. So I'd say from a web perspective, from a starting grid or starting point, so Formula One started this week, so Formula One's in my head. But if you look at a starting point, I think obviously, you know, blog is going to be one of those important pieces. Now, once you've got that in place, you can then decide where you want to distribute that blog. So it may be you want to put that up in articles on LinkedIn. You may want to put a post across to Twitter and Facebook and link it back to your website to drive some traffic back to your site. You may even want to throw some money at it. You may want to kind of amplify it and decide that this is really good. I want more people to watch it. Now, obviously, you know, certain types of content resonates on other platforms more than, you know, let's say some other. So you wouldn't necessarily want to put a blog up on YouTube, right? Understandably, because no one's gonna do it unless you're transcribing it or reading it. So when it comes to the video content, the audio content, this is kind of where you need to start thinking about, or how can I, you know, create some content on those channels. I think the thing is that we, especially when you look from a social perspective, we've always been very passionate about trying to, you know, generate value from social. So not just, you know, social media to have social media or to have a vanity blog. Nothing should be vanity driven. Everything should have a meaning. So, you know, if you are writing content or producing content, video, audio, etc., you need to make sure, even infographics, actually, infographics are content, right? Even if you're producing this, they should be customized to where you're going to push it or promote it, right?
Okay. I guess what I was trying to kind of push you into was talking about audiences.
But, sorry, I just I usually have a pretty good ability to read your mind, but obviously, clearly, I didn't get that connection. Why don't you ask me the question again, Amit?
I might do, yeah. So actually, let me make it clearer. So basically, when we're talking about sort of content distribution and creating content, should we be kind of looking at, you know, where these, you know, where your audiences live, you know, the audiences that are kind of relevant to your business, and then kind of reverse engineer, you know, that content ideation and the content creation process? I mean, what I mean?
Look, I mean, so I mean, 100%, right? So, you know, and I think I touched upon it at the end there, even without realizing. But from a vanity perspective, you know, you don't need to be out there producing content because you just fancy producing content. There should be a meaning behind it, and usually that meaning is trained or focused on the individuals that you want to, you know, either attract or the individuals that you want to basically start a conversation with. So, you know, you mentioned hotels previously, for example. You know, ideally the hotels want to be having conversations about what to do at the property, what to do in Dubai, how much does it cost to do X, how much does it cost to do Y, because they want to speak to, you know, families, couples, you know, solo travelers, essentially right at that beginning point. So it's very important that you map out your audiences or your personas, and understand what's going to resonate with those individuals. And also, you know, to change the style. I mean, we had an insurance client previously, if you remember, and basically depending on the audience, we changed the content the way that it was written. So, for example, it was an insurance, health insurance group policy for companies, companies with 500 plus employees. That's what they were looking for. So the content piece in this scenario, the one was written for finance, so an audience of finance directors, and it was very much about the cost of insuring your employees, right? You know, very focused on numbers, focused on kind of what, you know, what's the best policies. But then the different audience from HR directors, different type of content. So what we were writing about was, you know, the value of providing good healthcare for your employees.
Sure.
You know, what's the employee benefit attached to that? So yeah, you're 100% right. You know, you need to consider. I guess there's almost, you know, three things in there. You need to consider who you're speaking to, and the message you want to get across. Obviously, where are those individuals going to live? So, you know, for example, are you talking to a very young audience? Is a young audience going to be on Facebook here in this part of the world? Potentially not, right? So actually, my content I'm producing for them, I may want to produce on a different platform, right, like TikTok or Snap, and make sure that the right people see my content.
Yeah, we've just had a question about this as well. Thanks, Rebecca. But you know, if we're talking about, you know, companies who are starting out, where do they find, you know, these audiences? So you know, how do they kind of understand which platforms, you know, have audiences that are relevant to their business?
I still think going back to, you know, lowest hanging fruit as far as search. So I think looking at from a search perspective around your brand or your service or your product. So understand, I mean, if you there's some tools out there that allow you to kind of understand what search terms are being used, but even Google themselves, if you type in, for example, going back to the hotel reference, you know, how much does a family hotel cost on the Palm? If you type that in, you'll see the other search terms that people are also searching around that. So, you know, that could give you a good starting point. I mean, I think that's something that, you know, countless meetings we've shown clients, you know, that just by doing this, you can start to kind of realize some of these
but
questions.
I think just on an audience specific perspective. So, for example, you know, how does a company kind of really understand which audiences live on which platforms? I mean, is it I don't know, is it a common sense approach? Is it a test it and see approach? You know, how do people do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the good things about, you know, so if you look at it from a social perspective, and you look at the social platforms, every single platform out there at the moment has a self-provisioning element. So be it Google, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, they're all self-provisioning. So that meaning that all of you can open up an account, and you can effectively, you know, almost build out like a test campaign. Now, when you start to build out those test campaigns, it gives you, so how many Facebook users there are, how many people from the ages of 20 to 30, how many, you know, on LinkedIn, for example, you can look at how many people I can target with IT in their job title, for example, with companies less than 2,000. So I'd say that if people are looking to understand potentially where their audiences live, I'd say, you know, jump on and look at running, not effectively even activating a campaign, but just going through that process to see actually the filtering that is available. Because obviously from a B2B perspective, LinkedIn is the dominant platform because it allows you to target by industry, by you know, job title, by sector, etc., and company size. Whereas something, you know, like the likes of Facebook and Instagram is more based on, kind of interest in some of those other things.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah. Thanks. No, I think that's important. I think we've got about, I'd say, 10 minutes, Andrew, but I think it'd be good to touch on some of our story, in terms of
what's worked for us.
And I think, as Andrew mentioned previously, this isn't, content marketing isn't new for us. Obviously, as an agency, this is, a service that we provide, but we've always had a kind of practice what you preach mentality within the company, right? So it's always that we will try things first, we'll measure the impact. If we feel as if it has, potential benefits for others, that's where we'll start to kind of explore this. But nothing that we do isn't kind of tried and tested previously, right? So
no, we're guinea pigs, very much guinea pigs.
Yeah, and which is cool. I like that. I mean, so if we look at maybe March, perhaps let's start, rather than talking about the last 15 years, if we talk about the last few months, I think that journey's been really good. It's allowed us to do a lot. So maybe touch on that, Andrew.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, effectively, when everything hit, we doubled down on our content creation. And that approach was across the board. So from a blog perspective, it was, activating everyone in the Nexa family. So listen, guys, things you want to talk about, get writing. Let's start, getting some of that content out there, which we've never really touched upon previously. So straight away, it was activating the entire Nexa team to look at starting to produce content that could be used on a blog environment. As we said, we started to build out some videos as well and put that in as well, based around some of the services that we're doing. I think week 1 or 2, we'd already started kind of aggressively creating content on LinkedIn, but we again doubled down on that. So basically, that wasn't just us as Nexa, but it was the entire Nexa family again. So the content that we were producing, making sure that we were distributing it across the entire LinkedIn network. And to be quite frank and honest, from a social perspective as well, our focus has always been, servicing clients first from their social requirements. We have a lot of clients who look after their social, and sometimes, our own social was neglected. So that was a statement, that we made very early on. That was like, no, we're going to focus on our own social. We're going to make sure that our own Facebook is up to date, our own Instagram, Twitter, everything is now kind of working and running effectively. So we're treating ourselves as clients. And I think that's almost, what we did, right? We just said, okay, if Nexa is a client, what would we do for that client? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, which I think summarizes it nicely. I think just to go a little bit deeper, we, like many companies, we cut our marketing budget immediately, even though we kind of preached to our clients that they perhaps shouldn't do that. But we kind of looked at it and said, look, we're not really sure what's going on from a kind of, economy perspective. How many people are kind of out there ready to purchase our products or services. These were kind of unknowns, sort of the impact of COVID here. But what we did do is we leveraged free distribution, and what we also did, obviously, like you said, by kind of enabling people within our organization to create content. And again, what we wanted to do is create content that was helpful to others, right? This wasn't, again, sales content. This was very kind of informative how-tos. We started writing about things which had no relevance to digital marketing at all, for example, right? We were trying to kind of understand the psychology behind, people's thought processes, what their mindsets were. We partnered with clients and partners to create content. And all of that was really kind of powerful, but actually we spent no money. And I think what was really interesting is it allowed us to kind of understand, okay, well, look, we're not spending a penny on kind of distributing this content, but actually what impact does it have on our kind of overall visibility? And I guess it was a step-by-step procedure, because we started to see, the impact of some of that content very quickly. certainly from a kind of website traffic perspective. So, the fact that we were creating new content made us more interesting in the eyes of Google, because, we saw an immediate lift in our sort of search visibility. I think the second thing that happened is that additional traffic that came onto the website, we saw that conversions were not at the same rate, but what we did realize very quickly is there were still a lot of people in that research phase, right? So they might not be ready to buy right now. But look, if that, research phase takes 6 months because of what's going on around us, so be it, right?
Fine, yeah.
It's still better that they're researching in our house as opposed to someone else's.
Exactly.
And then I think it was on the impact of that where we even said, okay, well, actually, great, we are creating content. This is working for us. Our search visibility is extremely high. Our overall brand visibility was very high,
elevated. Yeah.
And then we said, okay, what else can we do? And I guess where we did start spending money was essentially investing in Zoom webinar, right? In terms of the additional license related to that, right? Yeah. But again, that sort of $49 a month or $149 a month, which I think we upgraded to the bigger version. Yeah. It was still a relatively small investment, and I guess from a kind of, again, webinar perspective and the growth show and how that kind of originated. Again, it was with the same mindset, right? In terms of
totally. It was very much non-salesy. I think very real. So the whole point was that what we wanted to do is we wanted to have a show. We didn't want to, necessarily do what others were doing. And there's nothing wrong with that. But what we saw was it was very much, if you do this, you get this. And that wasn't really the approach we wanted. We wanted more of a conversational style. We wanted a very real show, and essentially, good quality content that people could refer to over time. So there may be some things, obviously, that we spoke about 2 months ago that they're not as relevant today as they were. However, there's still value in that content. So obviously, the growth show, I think I think it's also just, a direction. So effectively, it wasn't everything that we approached wasn't, okay, we'll do this, while COVID's on, or we'll kind of just, do this for a couple of months. The commitment has actually increased. So as far as content that's being produced now from us and the whole Nexa family is the most it ever has, in recent history. So, going back 15 years. So, and even when we started our inbound journey 7 years ago, so we're producing more content daily than we ever have. And obviously a large part of that is because of the results, right? As you mentioned, there's an increase in traffic, there's an increase in visibility. And we know that, when we kind of meet people, no, we know Nexa, we've done the research, we understand, they're coming to us saying that we want to work with you. So obviously this has that impact, and we've seen it, and I guess that's why we're so passionate about it, right?
Yeah. That's really, and it goes back to that education piece, because we're not trying to sell, we're trying to help, right? And educate.
Exactly.
And I think that's it. So people are obviously going, out there looking at our content, seeing the kind of style of that content and relating to it, which I think is cool.
Until the point where we start selling digital growth show merchandise, right? Merch. So next week I might have up on here, like, you can buy some caps and stickers and stuff like that, like bumper stickers.
Well, okay. Maybe we can use your silhouette, right? But anyway.
We've both got our favicons, right? So we've obviously, bounced around and darted around, the value, and we've obviously seen that value, Amit. But do you actually want to show kind of everyone really what that value has meant to us?
Yeah, so guys, I think, one of the key points here is just measurement and ROI, because I think the biggest challenge internally, and I'll even here, right, to justify our investment in content marketing, I think would be very difficult if we weren't able to draw a straight line between the content we produce and the revenue generated. And I think the thing is, companies I guess get confused as to, okay, look, I can create these blog articles, but what does it actually, what does it do?
Yeah.
But the tools today exist that allow you to do exactly that and measure, precise, revenue metrics for very specific pieces of content. And what we thought we'd do is just show you, for example, the impact of the growth show for Nexa, right? Because obviously this was something that was new to us in terms of we hadn't ever launched a webinar. We weren't sure what the impact of it would be, but it fell in line with us wanting to kind of help people and continue that. So strategically it was good. But actually it was nice to see this. I'm sharing the screen now, but we're in, this is episode 9 now, right?
That's right, yeah.
And already we've been able to see, and again, this is HubSpot, guys. So, again, tools like this just make this whole process really easy. So the fact that we can just go on, look at the analytics for one specific page, but we can actually see now that, in the last 8 weeks, so this is week 9, 8 deals have been influenced by our growth shows. These are people who either watch the show, whether they watch it live or whether they go back and watch it. These are people that have sort of consumed our content, and the impact of this can be calculated from a revenue perspective, right? And we're talking about sort of attributing revenue to this specific source of content. And from our perspective, I think when we both saw this, we were really surprised, because even if it was even if it's 0, we'd still be fine, because because we're helping people. But the fact that we can now see that, look, in a relatively short space of time, for those of you not in the UAE, that sort of equates to $15,000, $16,000. Yeah. Which is great, and again, it's good to see that, it works as a kind of strategy for Nexa. But also I'm really interested to see how that number grows and develops over the next maybe year or two, right? Because this 149 sort of dollar a month investment in Zoom, and the time obviously we spend kind of preparing and then hosting the show. I mean, it'll be super interesting to see, what the actual ROI of that is.
How they stack up, exactly.
And so I think guys, if you've got a commitment, to trying to understand the power of content, and really kind of attribute a dirham, dollar, or kind of pound value to that content. There's all these tools that exist. You don't even need HubSpot. There's other tools that do kind of similar kind of things, but definitely kind of worth bearing in mind, and maybe set targets, right? Maybe say to yourself, look, I'm going to engage in this. I'm going to commit to it. And actually I want to measure the ROI of this in 6 months. And this is what I'm aiming for. Because I think that changes the whole dynamic of what you do from a content creation perspective, content strategy perspective, and I just think it's super important. And for those of you who kind of watch this, perhaps you're looking for jobs now, or you're looking at maybe a changing career. The value of content marketers, I just feel, is just going to increase more and more, because now that people can attribute money back, I think for me it's a bit of a game changer, right?
Completely.
The fact that you can go, and it's beautiful. I mean, and that ROI figure is going to be huge, because if you're not talking about the investment in media and all of these things that typical kind of marketers do, if you can just create quality, ongoing and organic content, and really kind of commit to that process, it's the ROI figures will be huge.
And I think, as you said, what's nice is we're now looking at that revenue attribution across our entire content range. So the blogs that we're producing, trying to understand, okay, what's the impact, how has it helped either close a deal, or what's been its influence, and obviously dirham or dollar value associated to it. I mean, obviously now this is making money. We can take a salary, right, as hosts, as the digital growth show hosts. But I honestly, the digital growth show, when we sat down, the partners sat down, and we were kind of bouncing around some ideas. We never envisaged that it would have had a positive dirham impact on the business. I think at the time it was just a part of that content strategy, part of building out content, making sure that we were adding value and basically talking about what we've been up to, what clients have been up to, what's working for them, and more importantly, just adding value, right? So it's a bonus now that obviously this starts to influence people. And again, that goes back to we've made a decision not to gate the content as well. So for us, it's completely ungated. The content, you can come and watch all the previous episodes on here. You don't necessarily have to sign up. We've kind of deliberately made it open, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Andrew, I think let's leave it there.
I think we're good. Happy days. Thank you very much,
guys. Thank you very much for tuning in. It's always, again, this keeps us going. The fact that you guys do tune in week after week. I feel as if we've got a kind of regular following of people, of core people that tune in every single week, and it's always great to see your names. The only challenge with that is if you don't tune in next week, we're going to be kind of going, what do we do to upset them? So
that's it. Exactly. Yeah.
So please, just so we don't have kind of blind panics. Keep tuning in, guys. Look, we anything that you want to contribute with between now and next week, send through questions. We've got I think we're looking at a very kind of different kind of show next week, Andrew, right? Much more. Much more dynamic, kind of
more of an open forum. So obviously we've spoken a lot about different topics over the last 9 weeks here. So we had that 3-week bounce of HubSpot. Prior to that, we've spoken about kind of e-commerce and sales, marketing, etc. We had obviously Paul Bridger, special guest, who was in talking about going back to work in the hospitality and travel industry. So next week, what we want to do is, from all of you guys out there, we want to kind of hear any questions. So it could be anything, right? Anything that you really want to kind of understand, maybe a new business, as you said, that you have an idea, we'll anonymize it. So this isn't something that obviously we're going to say, if you want to, we can anonymize some of these questions, but we really want to start again, going back to helping people. What can we look at as specific scenarios? So what we'll do is we'll take all of those kind of inquiries during the week, and we'll just pick a select few, towards the end of the week, and then next week we'll kind of run through those.
Yeah, and obviously in the live show as well. Any questions you've got, tell us what what question you have. Give us some more context. Is it about your business specifically? Is it an industry specific question?
Yeah.
But yeah, we're happy to take live questions, throw them at us, and we'll do the best that we can to kind of give you kind of more insights and really kind of try and help, I guess, more than anything else. Perfect. We've already got questions coming in, so I love that. Thank you so much. And I'm
very cool.
Take a copy of that. Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you, guys. So look, we'll see you guys next week. And in the meantime, stay safe and stay well. Thanks, Andrew. You take care as well.
Thanks, Amit. Have a good week, everyone. Cheers. Bye.